Hi there, everyone. I hope all of you are okay. Today, I have a really special guest on my Reality Check Leadership podcast. His name is Lerio Cunha, and we're going to approach leadership in a different way. Hi, Lerio. Thank you so much for having accepted my invitation to be part of my Reality Leadership podcast. How are you, my friends?
I am great and I am hyper excited to join you as your guest today.
Cool. Thanks. Thank you so much. We haven't. We've had a brief conversation yesterday because we didn't know each other physically or virtually. We only knew ourselves, through LinkedIn comments and posts, etc. But I confess that I immediately shared somehow a connection with you because I felt some humbleness and some down to earth type of guy, which is something I really love. So I didn't have any single doubt to invite you to know a little bit more about you, so that also our audience knows a little bit more about you. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, it's more of a challenge. I would like to ask you to talk a little bit about you. Tell me who you are,
Mm-hmm.
but please drive the conversation towards the notion of what is your passion, right? Tell us who you are and what are you passionate about.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you for the challenge, Luis. I am Lerio. I was born and raised in Mozambique.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in high school, I dreamed of having my own summer camp.
Okay.
It is something that as a child I used to go to South Africa to spend a week, 2 weeks, and from that I developed a passion of adventure sports. And
Mm-hmm.
I there was this spark that I wanted to bring the activities, the adventure activities that I was doing in South Africa, I wanted to bring to Mozambique.
Cool.
Meanwhile, at the time, it was 2008, and I'm not going to get into politics, so don't worry. But I feel that what I'm going to say next can best describe one of my passions. And in 2008, that was when Obama was first campaigning for his first elections.
All
And
right.
for me to
No,
see, so sorry?
no, I was going just to tell you that I'm a big fan of North American politics, so I clearly
Nice.
remember that periods when Obama was campaigning. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, and it was for me very intriguing and amazing.
Mm-hmm.
How could someone could make you cry, be very sentimental and touch you deeply with his words, and in 5-10 seconds tops he would make you galvanize and cheer. And for me that was an amazing skill, amazing gift that I remember thinking to myself, in 30 years when I retire, instead of retiring and stop working, that's what I want to do. I want to travel the world and speak to people so that I could have the same impact or give the same feeling that Obama would give me when I listened to his debates, the tears, the spark in the eyes, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Little did I know that it wouldn't be in 30 years when I would retire. Things change along the way. I came to Portugal, to Lisbon, to pursue academic studies in order to acquire some knowledge so that I will go back to Mozambique in order to build the dream of having summer camp. But
Okay.
life happened in the middle in a way, and one thing led to another, and we can put it aside for another conversation. If you invite me for another conversation, we can talk about that. And little did I know that I would be doing what I thought I would be doing in 30 years' time. I am doing that after 10 years. So to resume to your question, my passion is people, to interact with people, to, let's say that I'll have a 1 hour talk with people in a conference or a 2 day training. Out of the 2 days, if one person in the audience can take one thing that will be thought provoking, I'm not saying that it will change their lives, because the only people capable of changing their lives is your own self. No one can change other people. But if you can spark something, if you can change or give some thought provoking ideas, then that's when I feel mission accomplished, and that's when I feel the most satisfaction in what I do. I don't know if I answered your question. If that's
You did, but it sparks it sparked a little bit of curiosity. How did your family react to the fact that there was this young boy that was seeing Barack Obama, having doing speeches and saying yes we can? How did your family react to the fact that I can imagine you told them, no, I want to inspire people and I want to talk with people. That's what I want to do for a living. What was their reaction?
I'm having this was a 5 second pause, because with what I'm gonna say, I don't want to be expelled from the family circle, but I'll say it anyway. I do believe that in my family, my mother and my uncle are those who actually really understand what I do for a living, what is exactly my passion. I do believe that even some of my friends and family members, they know that I travel a lot. They know
All
that
right.
I'm in Lisbon or Europe, but specifically what I do, I'm positive that there's a big question mark. Yeah.
I think that's curious, because I also think the same thing from about my family, because I work in IT for for the last 15 years,
Mhm.
and every time I jump into their homes for a dinner, for a lunch, they
Mhm.
immediately just say, hey, how many computers did you fix today? That's I think they still know when I talk. I did consulting, I did project management, I did nearshore managing. For them, it's okay. You are sitting in front of a computer. You know what my wife, she used to tell me, you
Tell me.
really do lovely PowerPoints. Because that's one of the tools I use, of course, to share
Okay.
knowledge.
Okay.
But cool. Thanks for sharing that. It's good to see that I'm not alone in the world. That there are more people out there whose their family still don't know quite well
Yeah,
what
and
they do.
I think I should start practicing. So, because if they don't understand, I always like to believe when we're communicating, if the other party, they really don't get what I'm doing, it's because I'm not communicating well. My message is not getting
Right.
across. So
It's
it's
true.
something that I should start practicing, because I have a 1-year-old child.
Mm-hmm.
So when he starts to, in a few years, to ask me, hey, daddy, what do you do? I need to come up with something simpler, but that he will get the exact idea of what I do. And if we can explain something to a child, to children, I believe that then it will be easier to explain to adult people.
I
Yeah,
agree. I agree. But communication goes both ways. So your family members, they need to be able to listen, to really want to listen to what you're telling about, right? To what you're
correct,
sharing. Cool,
correct.
Lerio. So once again, welcome to the Reality Check Leadership Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about leadership and what are the impacts and the consequences of acting and performing leadership in a positive or in a negative way. But with you today, as we've discussed, I think I would like to do something a little bit more different. still
Okay.
talking about leadership, but approaching one of the topics that in fact you've come up with, that I really felt a good connection with it. And that
Okay.
topic is the topic of vulnerability. So
Mm.
I would like to have the next minutes of our conversation focus a little bit on this tiny, little, huge aspects about vulnerability. But in order to do it, I would like to challenge you to see a couple of videos of someone that I really look up to when we talk about vulnerability, which is Brene Brown.
Mm.
And we go through that. Okay, I show you a
Oh.
small clip of
Mhm.
around 30, 40 seconds, and then we run through it. I have more clips to share, but if we spend all the time in the first one, fine. Either way, it's a conversation. So let's go with it. So
Eat it.
here I go. Let me see if I can share my screen. Yep, share screen. So let's go. This is the first clip.
So where I started was with connection, because by the time you're a social worker for 10 years, what you realize is that connection is why we're here. It's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. This is what it's all about. It doesn't matter whether you talk to people who work in social justice and mental health and abuse and neglect. What we know is that connection, the ability to feel connected, is neurobiologically, that's how we're wired. It's why we're here.
This is the first clip, Lerio, and Brene introduces the notion of connection. That's why we are here. And focusing a little bit on what you said in the past, you wanted to inspire people and talk with people.
Mm.
I tend to think that you want to do that because you want to connect with people.
Mhm.
What's your view there?
More, I would be lying if I say that I didn't. My purpose, my goal was not to connect with people, but much more than that. Beyond that, I would say that it's so that people can connect with other people. So if I can, in a sort of way, be a vessel, an instrument, a tool that would allow others to connect with each other, to find ways to better connect with their family members, with friends, with colleagues at work, with their employees, with their superiors, that's when I actually feel yes, when I receive that feedback. So as Brene Brown said, it's all about connection. We all want to feel connected, and that's
Mhm.
why we're here. I'm not sure if she was saying that's why we're here at the conference that she was talking, or as
No, that's why we're
humans,
here. Yeah, as humans.
as
She was
humans.
mentioning as humans.
And both would still make sense.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, Luis.
you did. But can you share with me an example of a piece of work that you do, something that you do, I don't know, training or an event, a talk? How do you know that the message is going across, and how do you know that people are connecting with that message that will make them understand, oh, maybe tomorrow if I do this, I'll maybe connect differently with the other person? So can you give us an example of the work you do?
Yeah. The work I do, if we can put a label, a superficial label,
Mm-hmm.
it would be public speaking and storytelling.
Okay.
If we can put, like, this is the tip of the iceberg. What's underneath, the non-visible part, is people sharing stories, people giving feedback to one another, and it's something that I saw and I identified in my experiences as a facilitator, is that when you receive and give feedback from your peers, and to your peers, consciously or unconscious, what happens is you get the feeling that, oh, if they give me feedback, it might mean that they care about me, that they want me to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And last but not least, it has strengthened the bonds between those who are actually taking part in the experience. Let's pretend that we are a year, 10 months ago. Or if everything goes well, 6 months from now, we will
I
be
think, yeah, I sense that
6 months from now.
I sense
So
that you're sharing something pre-COVID, right?
yeah, pre-COVID, or let's say post-COVID,
Or post-COVID.
or after we will socialize again as we used to before COVID. We have a training. You are one of my participants.
Mm-hmm.
The whole experience that I try to create is from the moment that participants step foot in the door of the training. It is not when I say, good morning, everyone, let's begin the training, and they're seated in the circle shape, but it's from the moment they step in.
Mm-hmm.
I tell them to you, this is where you can put your belongings, there's water there, and you may find a chair and make yourself comfortable while everyone arrives. And what happens there, participants feel that the training is still is about to start. Underneath each chair, I always put some cards. And as they wait for everyone, and then it's also something to avoid the awkward silence. People usually grab their cell phone and stuff.
Right.
I tell them to pick a card, read it out loud. And this is what it follows. So Luis, pick a number from 1 to 8.
5.
5. Tell a story about a memory from school.
Running around. No, I was the guy with the glasses, so I was always teased because I had 4 eyes. But at the same time, I was extremely athletic in terms of sportive guy. So I ran as fast as I could, and no one would catch me. So I was like the glasses guy that really was good at sports.
Nice. Thank you for sharing.
Welcome.
This comes from a deck of cards called More Than One Story.
Mm-hmm.
And it could go from tell a story about an embarrassing moment, tell something about your family, tell about someone you miss, tell about a talent you have and how you use it, tell about a person who had an impact in your life, describe a big event of your life, and tell a story about a time when you were generous. These are just a sample of the cards I picked it up. And what happens is you have people sharing stories. Some of them don't require vulnerability, or that you don't need to be vulnerable. But others, actually, you may share things that you never shared, even though you've been working with those people in the training for 10 years, for 15 years. And I already had some reactions. So this happens, and then the training begins as participants think. In the next break, I had someone coming, this happened 2 years ago, and she came, Lerio, you know what? I don't know what happened, but I feel that I'm really closer to my colleagues. I don't know if you planned this but I cannot explain. I was like acting surprised, like, oh, yeah. But no, just a simple game that they think it's not part of the public speaking and storytelling, but it's about communication. It's about in some of the sharing, getting naked in front of people that you usually maybe only go and have lunch with them and you say, hello, how are you? But it's in a superficial level. And what happens when you share this kind of stories? Some of them are simple, maybe 1 minute, you connect.
Completely.
You connect.
Yeah. Really
yes,
cool. Really cool.
Yes, and interesting enough was I saw this deck of cards with the mentors from those who I learned how to facilitate, how to conduct workshops. And I said, okay, I want to have that tool for team buildings, etc., etc. When I ordered from Germany, and when the deck of cards arrived, I was feeling, when a little kid receives a gift, he wants to open, he wants to show off to their friends. And at that day, I had 2 friends of mine coming over for dinner. And I said, well, this is not work, but I'm really excited about it. Can we try 1 round of it? And they said, yeah, sure. We spent from 7 p.m. until 2 a.m. playing the game.
I love it. I want that game.
Yeah. The name of the game, and just a little bit of background, it's called More Than One Story.
Okay.
And why that name? Because there's a famous TED Talk called The Danger of a Single Story. And basically the speaker shares that sometimes, specifically in Africa, the world only has one story, and that story creates stereotypes, prejudices.
Right.
For example, when you see in the news, African countries, it's all a kid with a gun, a kid with a big belly, or the safaris. And people think with that single story that that's the reality in a box.
Yeah.
So the name of this talk is The Danger of Single Story. And a group of young Swedish people, they created this deck of cards that is more than one story. Because the whole goal is the more stories we hear about someone, the less barriers, the less prejudices we create. So it's about building bridges. And building bridges, it's about connections. Yeah.
Yeah. Really cool. And I think it really matches with what Brene Brown was saying, connection. And I can share with you that I've approached this yesterday with you, but my mom passed away a couple of months ago, and I was suffering in the sense, well, there was a lot of suffering, of course, but there was a specific suffering about, there was a connection I had with her that I didn't have with anyone else, right? So when I had a story to share or an event or anything, I would call her and I would tell her, this is what happened, So because her reaction was different to anyone else. And when I was hearing Brene Brown talking about connection, I clearly understood the connection we have with people, with different people, is different, and it's never replaceable. Because the way a person reacts to a story that you tell her, it's going to be different to anyone other, because they have their own education, their own experience, their own connection to you. And when I was hearing this, it really felt, what I miss is the connection, because I can still share, I can still, think about her and share something, but the connection, the reaction, that's what I don't have. And that's what I think, if we put it in a last, let's say, difficult moment, if we put it in our businesses, in our day-to-day work, each one of us has a specific connection with each of one of our colleagues. And that connection is never replaceable, and it's always different. So I truly believe in what you mentioned, and if that's part of your training, I want to do that because I really felt it's really cool. More than one story. Lerio, let's move on. I have a second clip to show you. Okay. And I think there is a story, in the consequence of the clips. Let me show you.
I ran into this unnamed thing that absolutely unraveled connection in a way that I didn't understand or had never seen. And so I pulled back out of the research and thought, I need to figure out what this is. And it turned out to be shame. And shame is really easily understood as the fear of disconnection. Is there something about me that if other people know it or see it, that I won't be worthy of connection? What underpinned this shame, this I'm not good enough, which we all know that feeling, I'm not blank enough, I'm not thin enough, rich enough, beautiful enough, smart enough, promoted enough. The thing that underpinned this was excruciating vulnerability. This idea of, in order for connection to happen, we have to allow ourselves to be seen, really seen.
To connect, we need to show ourselves as we are and to be seen, really seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's powerful.
Yes, and it is powerful, and sometimes just by hearing the words, we may think that that's easy. We just need to allow ourselves to be seen.
Right.
But in the contrary, with all the society or the way we are raised, the way we see connecting with the top of leadership, we have different connotations for what is to be a leader. If you want to have people to be productive and if you want to lead them, you need to show that you're strong.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we even think that it's a gender thing, because I think it's changing, but it's still enrooted in our society. It's in the way we are raised or our expectations.
Yep.
That men don't cry. You have to be tough enough or tough love. But I guess sometimes it goes beyond, because I've heard just recently, I was talking to a friend, and he has a very peculiar relationship with his mother. And because her mother, 30 years ago, she was working at the port in the north of Portugal. And this industry is dominated by men. And she was actually in a role of a managed role,
Mm-hmm.
but she had to change to toughen up so that she would be respected and people would follow her
Yep.
leadership. So she couldn't show vulnerability, you know, but that's really hard to connect. I do believe. And what I feel in my trainings is, what I try to do is actually to have everyone to get naked in front of people, to have especially the leaders, the managers, the CEOs, the executives. Those are the ones who actually push them. And I wouldn't say there's a word, two words. So instead of getting out of the comfort zone, we try to expand the comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And so you are getting vulnerable and you're able to connect. Sometimes it's not easy, but I do believe if we create the right environment, if we use these cards, then it helps to better connect with those around us.
When I was hearing this, I don't know, I was seeing this clip, and when Brene Brown shares that one thing that hinders connection is the fear, right? The fear and the shame of not being part of, not being integrated. I immediately thought, back at school, when you have a group of friends, and then there is always on the class one or two people completely outside of the bubble of connections of people, and they are, they start to dress differently or they start to act differently. They are immediately put aside, right? They are, normally that's what happened, and even themselves they protect their the way they want to live and the way they want to be. They isolate, although I'm quite sure everyone needs and wants to feel integrated with something, a group, an activity, an experience, a work, a friend. We all, right? It's interesting to see that immediately from young age, everything which is not normal or not within our normal, we immediately tend to distance ourselves from it. And that, if you go then to the company side, if you are not within the norm, it's harder for a leader to, if you didn't have that right level of understanding that each one is different, but each one has to connect. If he doesn't do that effort, that person will not be connected, will not be in your grace, let's say, and it will immediately have an impact and an effect on your team, on the way you lead people.
Yes, definitely. It's interesting. Yesterday when we spoke, even last week, you mentioned Brene Brown, and at the moment I'm actually reading a book from her, and it's Daring Greatly. And today actually, I was listening to, I think it was a 1 hour bit of the audiobook, and she mentioned that it was a German enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
They were not meeting their year goals, and at the end of the year, the CEO actually shared that because of his behavioral, his actions, his message was not creating the effect that they wanted. They were not meeting the goals. So he got naked in front of everyone in the whole company, and he said, and I need your help in order for us to meet those goals that we previously assigned. Right. And what happened was people felt connected to him, and they even surpassed their competitors that were way ahead of them. So they went beyond what they have set for themselves. And the reason why, because he was vulnerable and he was able to ask for help. Something that we have the notions when we ask for help, or when we admit that we are doing something wrong or we failed, we feel that we'll be excruciated, scrutinized, and that I will lose my leadership role. And that's the opposite. And studies shows the opposite. Brene Brown shows that it's exactly opposite.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So that for me, it was powerful in the sense that I was trying to understand, so what disables the connection? What can impact negatively? And she stated really simply, she said, it's the fear. It's the fear and the shame of not being good enough, or of not telling the right thing, of doing things wrong. And when you do that, you hinder yourself from acting. And that means you don't have the opportunity to create, to fail, to create the relationship, to move on. And it was really powerful. I really learned a lot with this single clip. Let me show you another one. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
We think of vulnerability as a dark emotion. We think of it as the core of fear and shame and grief and disappointment, uncertainty, things that we do not want to feel, right? Things that I don't want to be vulnerable because that means I'm afraid. That means I'm uncertain. That means I'm at risk. I'm exposed. I'm in grief. So what we do is we armor up and we say, I do not want to slip into these dark emotions. I will not let myself be vulnerable.
I think I didn't show you before this, but you really said this, with that. When she says we armor up so that no one sees that I'm afraid.
Yes, and
leaders do that a lot.
Yes, and I don't think it's only leaders. Like, those are actually, we spot in leaders because they're in the spotlight more than the ones below them. But I guess all of us, not all of us, but the majority of us, we tend to armor up. I used to use another expression, was like, we wear masks.
Yeah.
The thing is, and I do believe that most of the time it's in a subconscious, unconscious level than in conscious. We feel that there's something about that person. I cannot say what really is. Well, deep down, what we're saying is like, I don't think that person was vulnerable. I don't think that person was, we can even say, authentic.
Right.
I
She's
just
hiding
don't know.
something, or he's hiding something.
Or there's something fishy. And this is something that I also see and also receive that feedback. When I was rehearsing a lot my speeches for the contest speeches, competition speeches. I was rehearsing comma to word, gesture here, everything.
Right.
And then I got the feedback like, Lerio, I think it was over rehearsed and it lost the authenticity, you know? And sometimes, even if it's not over rehearsed, people will spot like, there was something okay, good presence in stage, good voice, but there was something odd. I cannot say what it is. And maybe it was because you are not getting naked completely. You were
Right.
putting mask and you were not showing your true self. That way, people couldn't connect, even though they don't know, they didn't, or they don't know why. But when they say like, there was something there that I cannot put a name, a label,
Yeah.
there's no connection there. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember a story, 2 years ago. I had an office in my previous company, and my team, we would do something, a meeting or a presentation, whatever. And there was once the meeting didn't. It was not all right. I was not in my best.
Mm.
But I went back to the office and I was thinking, oh shit, this was not good. And one of my managers, he jumped into the office and he asked me, Luis, what's wrong? You look different. What happened?
Mm.
And my reply was, nothing wrong. I'm fine. I did the meeting. It's done. Thank you. And he, like you were saying, he sensed that something was not right. So he left. And when he closed the door, I immediately sank and I said, shit, I just lost an opportunity to tell him that the meeting was not all right because somehow I was not well.
Mm.
And I felt I was somehow deceiving him, or I was lying to him, because I was lying. Well, we both knew something was wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but I just didn't take out the mask and tell him the real thing. And I'm quite sure if I did, he would immediately have felt some empathy and would say, yeah, I understand why that happened like that. And I'm here for you. Nice. So I lost an opportunity. And I would like to share, if there's something, I would love people to understand that we should take all the opportunities we have to connect with people, because that will make a big impact on your day and on your career. I'm quite sure.
Yes. And just to add another layer on the valuable thing that you just said, is I also do believe that we're not entitled, or it's not up to us to force that others will be vulnerable toward us, but we can actually, sometimes it's just the extra mile, as in, not how are you? Like, oh, I'm okay, good, okay, then fine. No, really, how are you? Because there's different levels, like how are you? Like, I'm fine, everything is fine. And then you can go the extra mile, as in, you actually, not like, really, I have time, I have 5 minutes, how are you? And then that can allow a great opportunity to share and to feel connected. So I guess we can make it like both ways, in a collaborative effort towards vulnerability.
There is, I think there's a guy called Kerwin Ray, and he's I think he's Australian, and he was talking about that question, the "How are you?" question, and his feedback was, when somebody asks you "How are you?" you should reply in a completely surprised manner. You should reply, "I am spectacular," or "I am super pumped." Things that will make the other person, why are you super pumped? Why are you spectacular? Just because people tend to ask that without for the sake of asking. But if they
Exactly.
ask, if they ask like you were mentioning, that has a really powerful impact.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Let's move on, Lerio. I have what do I have more? Let me see. Share screen. Let's go.
Vulnerability is the center of difficult emotion, but it's also the birthplace of every positive emotion that we need in our lives. Love, belonging, joy, empathy. No vulnerability, no empathy. In a culture where people are afraid to be vulnerable, you can't have empathy. You know, empathy is not a default response. If you share something with me that's difficult, in order for me to be truly empathic, I have to step into what you're feeling. And that's vulnerable. So there can be no empathy without vulnerability.
You know, Lerio, I will let you go with this, but I've learned I was doing something really wrong after seeing this. When we talk to leaders and when we ask and we tell them you have to be empathic, you have to use and to train and to upskill your empathy skill. This is not, and I felt this in my previous team when I was saying this. You need to be empathic, and then the feedback I was getting from their team was, yeah, he asks me how I am, but he really doesn't mean it. So this clip really made me think that in order to train our ability to be empathic, we need to train our ability to become vulnerable. Because if you are not vulnerable, if you are always in that mask, strong armor, how on earth are you going to put yourself on the other shoes? So this was really cool. What do you think?
I do share the same opinion. I guess there are some words that are really used nowadays, and sometimes we can play with the meaning that we give to those words, or we need to understand what actually implies it. For example, and I hope I'm not going sidetrack, we use a lot the word procrastination. Procrastination this, I'm fighting for procrastination, I'm batting for the procrastination. And I remember once in Berlin, Denise Banks told me, no, Larry, you were not procrastinating. You didn't want to do it. And you just need to find out why you didn't want to do it. Why every time you put that specific errand task in your to-do list, you always leaving it aside or prioritizing others.
Right.
Now, putting that aside, what that clip made me reflect, provoked in me, was actually, we see someone that is not empathic, that does not have the capability of putting themselves in the other shoes. And then I say like, oh, you should be more empathic. Right. I should be more empathic. My leader is not empathic at all. He has zero empathy.
Exactly.
And Brene Brown just told us, empathy is not a default thing. It's a consequence of stepping in vulnerability. And it just got me thinking. I think it goes as well, what am I doing so that that person will be empathic? Or why was my leader not empathic? How can my leader be more empathic? I think it's I just had a clarity, or there's just sparks in my mind right now. You need to step in, be vulnerable, and in the consequence, there will be empathy in the group connection.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, and it's very powerful, the sense that. And I was telling this yesterday to you on these exercises that I've already did in the past, of connecting with someone that you haven't connected with, and staying face to face with someone and ask them to share a story like you mentioned, and really look into the other person's eyes and start to let go all your armor and just think, what is that other person feeling and why is she or he telling me this? And that has an impact. So it has a tremendous impact. Lerio, I think I have one more.
Okay, let's go.
Let's go.
We see that a lot, that to be vulnerable, to be open, to be exposed is to be weak. And the truth is, what I found in my research is that vulnerability is not weakness. In fact, I would argue that it's our greatest measure of courage. The definition I use in my work of vulnerability is simply uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Vulnerability is about the willingness to show up and to be seen even when there are no guarantees.
Cool. So once again, she's focusing the fact that vulnerability should not be seen as a weak thing, but as a sign of courage. What's your view? Why is vulnerability, in her opinion, the first sign of being courageous?
Maybe I'm using the analogy a lot, but I continue to use, is to go in the street walking naked, and literally naked. Aside from people will think that you're crazy, it takes a lot of courage. And as she said, exposing, showing to, and being seen with no guarantees of what people will think. And that takes a lot of courage.
Right.
Especially right now in the era that we tend to worry a lot about our status, social media status,
What others
professional
think.
status, society status. We think that if we get naked, we never know, well, with no guarantee, there's no guarantee that how will people react? How will I be seen in the next event that person will see me? Will I have a label? And we tend to put the label of shame, of fear, of weakness. Hence, we don't share a lot. We don't take out the armor, nor the masks that we have. And it's actually the opposite. I'll try to make a bridge into a thought. When you forget what you'll say when you're on stage, when you are presenting some results to the CEOs, to the external stakeholders, 2 seconds feels like it's an eternity. 5 seconds, worst. And then we tend, actually, it gets even worse. The more seconds it passes when we blank, we think that it's an eternity. We think that people from now, they have a negative impression of the person that I am, but this is not the case. I tell my, I like to use when you forget your lines on stage, if it's like more than 5-10 seconds, people already know that you forget it.
Mm-hmm.
And we tend to feel that the whole audience wants us to fail, that they will be shaming afterwards. If it was maybe centuries ago that people would throw rotten tomatoes at our faces, that's not the case. In an audience of 100 people, maybe one person, maybe 2 people will act like that. And we tend to focus on those 2. Because those 2 will use our weakness against us. But what happens with the other 98 people in the audience? They want us to succeed, and when we remember our lines, even if it's 30 seconds later, they won't be like, shoot, No, they'll be like just in a fighting scene, in an action movie, in that moment that the main character is almost giving up, but then he remembers the sentence of the guru, of the sense of the master, and then he regains energy, he stands up, and then he fights and he wins. We have that feeling like, yes. And that's the same thing. When we are able to connect and we are able to show each other, to, if it's one person, if it's our team, what happens actually, it's the opposite of weakness. The person that just heard us being vulnerable, that witnessed that moment of vulnerability coming from us, they feel privileged. Sometimes they even think they take a responsibility posture, because they feel like, wow, if this person just shared this, now I'm responsible to take this as a gift and as make sure that I won't break the trust that that person just deposited in me, and trusting me that I was worthy enough of him, of her, to share this with me. And I think that feeling, it's just powerful, beyond powerful.
I agree. And I think we should always remember that we'll always have someone that will act and look up to us in a condescending way. Oh, poor guy. Oh, too bad. But as you mentioned, why do we focus on those, and why don't we focus on all the others that really want us to succeed, right? And in a team, that's the reality. Also, in the team, there is competitivity. There is an eagerness to grow, to be promoted, to get more money, to be more recognized, etc., etc., etc. And if you fail somehow, your first thought is, I failed, and there are 2 or 3 guys that immediately are going to say, I win because you failed. That happens a lot. And I think we need to somehow share with people and share with our teams that failing is a consequence of learning. Because and when I mean consequence of learning, is that if you didn't started to learn, you would not even have an opportunity to fail, because you would immediately, you didn't have anything. So you need to learn so that you can fail, so that you can learn again, so that you can fail. And that's the life of a team. That's the life of us here. We didn't do this podcast without errors. We made mistakes in English. We made, confusions. I've showed your LinkedIn profile. Those imperfections make us vulnerable and true and honest to what we do. And that's what I loved on this clip. So I have one more. Let me see.
When we work from a place, I believe, that says, I'm enough, then we stop screaming and start listening. We're kinder and gentler to the people around us, and we're kinder and gentler to ourselves.
Brene Brown sharing that the way that we can start connecting and being more empathic is to be, my understanding is to be happy with who you are, and that you are enough. And that applied to me a lot with my kid, because my kid, he's 5 years old, and he always had some difficulties in communicating, because he had a lot of ear issues when he was younger. And I always felt, me and my wife, we always felt a bit worried and guilty of not having detected that earlier. So now he's an extraordinary kid, super. Now he communicates a lot, although he stutters a little bit.
Nice.
But I was thinking, and she always tells me this. She always, Luis, this is our baby. This is who he is. Yes, he's imperfect. We're not in a perfect world. Yes, maybe he's not going to be a Harvard senior guy, or maybe he will. We never know. If we educate our kids and our families, if we talk with our families and our colleagues in a way that you are enough, with your imperfections, you are enough, I'm quite sure that life would be much easier.
Oh yes. To take away that weight, and it's something that Brene Brown also mentions, and you said the word guilt, and she's also in a previous clip she says about shame. And the different, I really like how she describes the two is like, we set up a meeting right now to do the podcast. I completely forget about it, and then you call me on my phone, WhatsApp, or text of LinkedIn. Hey, Lerio, we're 5 minutes about to start. Are you there? And then I
Where
go,
the hell are you?
where the hell am I? And I completely forgot about it. And then there's two ways of feeling. I could feel guilt, like, I did something wrong. I let my friend down. Or if I would feel shame, it's like, I'm not enough.
Right.
I'm not a good friend. I'm not a good person. And that's the thing. No, when we feel that, it means that we're feeling that we're not enough. And I think changing that narrative, okay, I did this, it is wrong. I'll just make sure that next time I'll be a good friend. I'll be a better friend than
Right.
last time. And yes, I think admitting that, but also thinking that I'm enough. I'm enough. And I think she said something that it goes both ways. And I feel that I'm enough, and I know that the other person is no better than me.
Right.
If we have that mindset, I do believe that it's easier to connect. But also, again, I do believe that in the stories that we share with each other, not only we'll have more empathy, but we'll feel a lot more connected to people. If you allow me, I want to share something that happens in one of my trainings. So it was a 2-day training. On the first day, one of the participants shared that, I remember one of her cards was actually share about a time that you were generous. And basically she shared the story of letting someone that was sleeping in the streets, it was homeless for some time, and she and her family, her husband and kids, took in that person. And I think the person was there for maybe a month until things would go back in track in that person's life. And this was a story, very generous. I don't know if I would be able to do it, but it was a really nice thing to hear. Second day, the last part, practical, I had participants pick up topics. And topics could go from biggest failure, biggest accomplishment, biggest fears, biggest regrets, the qualities I appreciate in others. I don't remember hers. And basically she was sharing that her parents were immigrants and they ran away. First, her father was kept in captivity, sent to a concentration camp, and her father was able to escape. And for several months or weeks, maybe I'm mistaken, they were sleeping in different people's house. And
Right.
that moment for everyone, including myself, it was such a privilege. Even though I'm not from that team, but I was part of that moment of sharing, moment of vulnerability, that she shared something really personal. And before people started giving feedback, I always have people giving a round of appreciation. What I appreciated most about that story, that speech. And one of the person said, well, now I get when you're talking about generosity. Because yesterday it was like, oh, she's a generous person. But after hearing this story, it goes to a completely different level.
Right.
I respect you more as a person. I feel much more connected to you as not only my colleague, but as a person without any mask, any armors. And yeah, it was a beautiful moment. And I know for sure that after that story and many more that group became closer together, to their leaders, to their colleagues, to the employees. It was a magical moment of vulnerability, being connected, being naked in front of other people. Yeah.
No, thanks for sharing. That's really, really powerful. And I was thinking when you were mentioning that out of this, our conversation of today, I think people can be a little bit frightened to what we're talking about, in the sense that this is difficult. Of course, being vulnerable is difficult. And but I wanted just to share that when we talk about being vulnerable and being vulnerability, this doesn't imply that you are going to share the story of your life with anyone else, right? This implies that, from my perspective, is that on each interaction you have on your day to day, you need to think, am I being reasonable here? Or am I not being reasonable? Am I not seeing things as they are? Or what can I do to see them differently? Can I listen more? Is this the right behavior I want to give to our people? So, of course, I think we are, on your example, you are showing really the most powerful, being naked, as you mentioned. That's really incredibly powerful. And in order to get there, you really need to be comfortable with doing that. But I think to become a bit more practical, I think that each one of us on our teams, on our works, on our day-to-day, the first action I would do would be to first listen, really listen, not just listening, and then thinking, is my behavior in line, or am I using my armor? Am I hiding a vulnerability that I have in order to become more recognized in the company? So just we don't have a lot of time, Lerio, because the conversation is long, but I would like to ask you, going also back to your experience, to your trainings, when you do, for example, a storytelling workshop, because what we are saying here, what we're talking, we are sharing stories, right? That's how we started this conversation. What are the main feedback and the main things that people take home after that? How they can take that knowledge and put them to work in their day-to-day?
The power of stories and the power of making things different, because some of the resistance that I get is, okay, Lerio, I do get this. It's very dynamic. It's very useful, but I don't see myself using that structure when I'm presenting this to my superiors, to the CEO. Not that I don't believe it, but I think they'll find it weird. I think that they'll find it weird. And
they probably will.
I don't think so. I just think that I give some tools, I give an experience to participants, then it's up to them to feel
right.
How that will impact, or no, not impact, sorry, what they can take for this kind of presentation. Maybe this point and this point, but for that one, I'll use that. So it's up to them to see how to apply without assuming right from the beginning that this, it's beautiful, but I don't see how I can apply it, you know, especially in a, not especially, let's say in the tech world, we feel that, okay, I'm going to only present stats and facts because that's what they want to hear.
That's a good one. Yeah.
It is known that if I just present you stats, facts, 2 hours from now, unless you have a photographic memory,
Exactly.
you remember, but most of us don't have photographic memories, you will forget. A month from now, let's not even go there. But if I tell you a story, a success story, or a story with challenges, even if it's 30 seconds, 1 minute story, and I incorporate those stats, those facts inside a story, you'll remember.
Yeah.
And sometimes those stories, and this is what I try to explain, when you share stories in your presentation, it doesn't mean that you're gonna, as you said, the story of our life. You will choose what is the story applied for here. Will it be a personal story? Will it be a tale? Will it be a story? As long as it connects to what you're presenting, then there you go.
Cool. Lerio, we started this conversation with connection. We evolved into vulnerability, and we evolved into why are we not so much vulnerable? Why are we afraid of? We talked about blame, guilt. We talked also a little bit about what can we do in order to overcome some of those vulnerabilities that we have, that we hide under a mask and what are the added values that goes out of that. And we ended up with an example that if you challenge yourself to do things a little bit differently, and maybe that has a really powerful impact on the work you do and on the people you connect with. But I don't want to finish this without asking you, as this is a leadership podcast, if you would have to share an advice to a future leader out there, to someone that is going to have an impact on others, what advice would that be?
Don't be afraid of vulnerability. Or if you are afraid, don't let it stop you from being vulnerable. Because I do believe, I'm a strong believer that when you're vulnerable, you're being courageous. And courage is contagious. The way to influence people is to be courageous, to have courage. And with that, vulnerability is one of the ways that you can do. And if you are a leader, if you will be a leader, on the way to be a leader, don't let this notion of vulnerability frighten you. Maybe you don't need to share the deepest thing that is so hard, or to start from there. There's this deck of cards. This is a really simple way that you can use it as a game. If you don't want to order, there's the online application for Android. It's called More Stories or One Stories. It's easy. You can find it and you can play with this with your teammates, with your colleagues, and trust me, you'll feel like this. Because when we feel like this, people work and walk towards the same cause and same direction.
Larry, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on, and I'm quite sure we'll probably have a second round someday in the future. Thank you so much for your generosity of being here, more or less 1 hour, and I wish you all the success and happiness. Thank you so much, my friend.
Yes, thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and I felt honored when you invited me, and right now I still feel the same feeling for being part of this experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. See you. Bye. Thanks.